here at Stitch in Heaven, the beautiful home of Stitch in Heaven, doing Learning Corner with Norma again. So we learned about the scant 1/4 inch, we learned about cutting accurately, and now we're going to go into piecing. So today is all about piecing tips and suggestions. Yay! Everybody wants to know how to piece better, right? So some of the tools that I use that are really good for helping you with your success are the Aurifil thread. It's a 50 weight. I like to use that for piecing, and it just makes everything go smoother, so that's my favorite thread to use for piecing. I like the Microtech needles, and they're sharp, so either the top stitch or the Microtech works good. These are 80-12 that I'm using, but 90-14 is what I always use for paper piecing, by the way. And we're going to also have our measuring gauge handy because we might need to check that 1/4 inch once in a while. I know you're going to all do it perfectly. Then we have the Sewline Glue Pen. So I am going to use pens. I have some fine jeweled head pens, but I am going to also use my glue stick a lot in place of pens, and I'm going to show you that tip and suggestion. It pops off and you can refill the glue in it, so you can always wind it down and wind it back up and refill the glue. So I love this thing. I have about 2 or 3 around my house. We're going to talk about how we hold our fabric when we do chain piecing. We're going to learn about chain piecing. Yay! Some of you that already quilt and do a lot of this already know how to do this, but I'll just show you some of my suggestions on that. I do like to use the purple thing for that. Sometimes I will use a chopstick. Not often, but I have these tools all available to me. And sometimes I'll use my seam ripper for something else besides ripping a seam. That's a good thing. And I'll use it to hold my fabric. So I will show you a couple of these things as we go along and do our piecing. So again, this is called Norma's Learning Corner, so you may do it differently, but I want to show you my tips and suggestions. We are going to be working on making what I call a 4-patch. So I teach this in the beginner class. It's real simple to piece, so we're going to start with simple. We're going to take 2 blocks that are 3.5 by 3.5 inch square, and we're going to piece them together. Now for the row, we need a total of 6 of these. So we're going to sew all 6 at once. Whoa, okay, we're going to move along here, right? So what we're going to do is our goal is to make this. So we're going to put our block here and our block here that we have our 3.5 inch square blocks. I'm going to lay it out just so you can see exactly what it looks like. So that's what it's going to look like in our block. And actually the way I lay it out, I want it to look like that, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. We're going to put these 2 pieces together. So we have 3 of these in our block. So 3 times 4, we actually are going to need 12. Well, no, we need 6. We just need 6. All right. I just got to calculate here, right? All right. So we're going to flip it over, and we're going to use our glue pen for this. This is where I won't use a straight pen, but I'll use a glue. So I'm going to take the glue and I'm going to run it along that piece right there, and then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to push down, and that's going to hold that. Okay? I'm going to do another one the same way. So we need 3 of these blocks in our first row. So we're going to put them over here by the sewing machine. We have 1, 2, that's 1 block. So we're going to do another one because I want to show you how to chain sew these. All right, so we're going to do another one, and we're going to take the glue and run it along there. Now, if you tend to get confused when you pick it up, I know that I'm always going to sew on this side when I take it to the machine. If you tend to get confused, you can throw a straight pin in there just to show you that, okay, I'm sewing on that side. But I know that that's what I'm doing because I'm lining it up. I'm up right here. So this is going to be our second one. Our second one, we need 3, so we're going to do 1 more. All right. And I love the glue method. It works really fast, and it's all going to stay there. It's not going to, by the way, gum up your machine in any way. So I've been using this for a long time and it does not gum it up at all. So you'll be really pleased with that. It's meant for fabric and it's meant for gluing. All right, so now we're going to take our purple thing and we're going to come over here and we're going to come to the sewing machine. Two things that you need to start with. I'm going to tell you, when I chain sew, I always use two scrap pieces. They're called B and E, beginning and end, real easy. You need two pieces, a B and an E, and they're just scrap pieces that I just folded underneath, and I'm going to use those when I come over to sew. I'm going to start with a scrap piece, and I'm going to put it in the machine underneath the feed dogs and underneath the foot. So again, I'm going to also remind myself that we're doing a scant 1/4 inch. So I'm looking at my 1/4 inch foot and moving it 2 stitches to the left. I want to have success, right? So I'm going to start sewing now. And when I get that scrap piece about so far, I stop. A scrap piece, number one, gives your machine something for the feed dogs to hold on to, and it also lifts your foot a little bit. So when you're ready to sew, it is ready for you, and you don't have to worry about any of the threads getting caught up in that first stitch that you do. So now I'm going to, the foot's already kind of lifted. I'm going to lift the foot just a tiny bit and put that little piece underneath my first piece, right? So I got my first piece and I got my little purple thing, and now I'm going to go and sew my 1/4 inch. And when I get to the end, the way I like to think about chain piecing is, if you've ever been to a deli where they have sausages by the link and sometimes they're attached and it looks like a string, that's what your chain piecing is going to be. So we're going to leave a little space in between, just a little bit, and then we're going to keep going. So I told you about the chopstick. It's also a good tool to hold your fabric. And if you have nothing else, use your seam ripper and it'll help you with maneuvering your fabric into the machine. Now you're going to notice I'm not pulling, I'm not pushing, I'm letting those feed dogs just do the flow of the fabric. So you don't need to do any pushing or pulling with this. We get to the end, we go a little bit of ways. I'm going to go ahead and take that pen out. So you see how nice my fabric stays, that I don't have to worry about pinning or holding it or adjusting it because I got it glued. It's not moving, baby. It is staying there. So we're going to sew all this first row of these blocks all at the same time. I got my glue a little bit wonky there, so I'm trying to straighten that out. And we're just going to keep going. And we're going to do a little bit more. Alrighty, and you'll get faster at this as you go, but wait until you see what we got at the end. Now, when we get to the end, what are we going to do? I'm going to leave a little space. I've got my scrap called E. This is my end scrap, and I'm going to put it in there. And when I put it in there, I'm going to leave it just like that. And I'm not going to even cut the thread. I'm just going to take my scissors and cut that off. I'm going to leave that right there. Whatever I want to do. Yay! So it just saves an extra step. You're ready to go the next time. So here's what they look like. We've chain sewed all of these, and now we need to cut them apart. So we're going to cut them apart. Ta-da! And when we get them all cut apart, then we'll look at them here a minute. All right, and there's my scrap piece. That was my beginning, and now it's going to be my end, and I'm going to put it over there on my machine. So here is our block. So now we're going to, I hope my iron stayed on, it maybe didn't, but now what we're going to do is we're going to do some pressing real quick, and I'm not going to do a lot of detailed pressing with these. I'm just going to press them enough that I can show you about piecing, because next time we get together, we're going to go in detail about pressing and ironing and the differences, and I'll get to talk a lot about that with you, and you're going to love some of the tips on that too. All right, so we're going to go over here, and what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to hit it real quick and set the seam, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to push finger press this to the dark side, okay? And I've got a lot of these to do, so I'm going to kind of press them out there and do that. I'm not going to hit the iron with all of them as much as to show you a few here. All right. There's a lot of work in piecing, but I'm just going to do these two first just to show you those two. All right. And we are just going to press right there on that seam, and we already finger pressed it to the dark side, right? And I'm going to hold it up so it's at the dark side. And I'm going to give it pressure and heat. Make sure that went to the dark side. My iron is talking to me. You hear that? It's talking to me. All right, so I gave it pressure and heat. All right, well, let's do a quick check here. So, whoops, I have one of those smart irons at home that jumps up, so I am really bad about setting that down. All right, so we're going to look at it real quick with our little gauge tool just to make sure that we're at 1/4 of an inch. Perfect, we're a little bit under, and that's what we want, okay? Because when we get done with this, it's going to be 6.5 by 6.5, so that's going to be important. So here's our 4 patch, just like this. And this is really what I wanted to show you about how to get seam on top of seam, because we want that 4 patch to meet in the middle as perfect as we can. It doesn't mean that maybe every time we might have to adjust it a little bit, but I'm going to show you how to get as close as you can. And this again is Norma's way that I teach in class, and we do it. We flip right sides together, so now we have right sides together. I'm going to take one of the long fine pins, and I'm going to put it about 1/4 of an inch down in the seam. So it's right there in the seam, about 1/4 of an inch down. Then what I'm going to do is lift up this piece, because I'm pinning this piece together, and I'm looking at the seam, and I'm going 1/4 inch right into that seam. So I've got this at 1/4 inch and this at 1/4 inch, my top piece and my bottom piece. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it down. I'm going to pull it tight so I have it tight. I'm going to flip it down and take my pin and go down like that. And you see where that's in the seam? That's what you want. You want it to hold at 1/4 inch right at the seam. And if you look at the back, the same thing, it's in the seam. So that straight pin being in the seam tells me it's going to hold it right there. Perfect, right? Now if you want to, we want to make sure these two sides don't wiggle on us, right? You can take a pin and put in there. Norma grabs the glue stick, and I'm going to stick a little bit of glue there and make sure that stays down, and a little bit of glue and make sure that stays down. All right, ta-da, there we go. So there's our first piece, just like that, where we have seam on top of seam. So rather than chain sewing this one, I am going to chain sew the other ones here in a minute, and we're going to make that first row. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and sew this one so I can show you how perfect that's going to be. All right, so I'm going to use my chopstick this time to show you how that works. And I've already got my first starter piece, my B piece, in there. So all I have to do is start feeding it in. Let my foot and my feed dogs do the work. Now people ask me, do you sew over that pin? Sometimes I do. Sometimes if I get it close enough, I'll pull it out. If I ever feel like I need to leave it, because the more I leave it, the more secure it is, I'm gonna go slow. If you go super slow, your machine will sense it and jump over it. If you're Speedy Gonzalez, I'm gonna tell you you're gonna break it every time, and you don't really wanna do that. So if you can, get as close as you can, and you can kind of pull it out. But I do a lot of times sew right over it because I know it's at 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to lift my foot just a little bit. There we go. So I can get that seam underneath there. You see how close I am? I'm super, super close. So I know that nothing's moving right now. It's super, super close. So I'm going to go ahead and take it out. And I'm going to keep going. And I get down here, and I'm going to put my end piece in, right? My end scrap piece. And when I get it in, I've got these huge big scissors for some reason. You can use your small scissors. I cut it out, so that's ready to go for next time. And we're going to take this off, and we're going to open it up. Ta-da! Look at that. Meets in the middle, right? So that's really, really important for our 4 patches. Now, our other goal is that this 4 patch needs to be 6.5. So let's take a look at that. Let's press it. Doesn't matter which way you press this. On your 4 patches when you're doing your small blocks, I would recommend that you go to the dark side when you're ironing, okay? But on this one, I'm going to set the seam a little bit. I'm going to come back to my talking iron and lift it up here and push down and give it heat and pressure. All right, perfect. And we have this perfect 4 patch. Look at that. We're going to take our 6.5 inch ruler and we're going to pull it over here and we're going to put the center of the ruler right in the center and we're going to look. I see a little bitty tiny scrap over here on this side. So usually if you're using a scant quarter, you might end up with a tiny bit extra somewhere, but you are not going to be short. So we know that we didn't have any problem with being short of 6.5. We know we just have to do a tiny bit of trimming over here. And half the time you won't need to do any trimming. That's all I did, and I got a perfect 6.5 inch block for my first row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how, this is the second row, and I'm going to show you what you can do with that 4 patch. You can take a focus fabric and then you can take a 4 patch and put them together and make yourself this awesome quilt. So I had some focus fabric here. And if you'll notice when you do the 4 patch, I made sure that all the dark fabric is going this way. But the main thing that I wanted to show you today is I wanted to show you how the 4 patch works. So I'm just going to kind of set it up there and how you do piecing. I'm going to pull that apart. Sometimes when you do the glue, you need to pull it apart. And just know when you use the glue, if you're worried about that it spilled over a little bit, take a toothbrush and some water and it washes right out. So anyway, that is perfect. So I'm just going to lay it out to show you when you piece it and you do your little 4 patch, it's going to look just like that. And because I don't have the seams in there, it's not exact, but there is our quilt, the first row and the second row, and piecing with the seams right on top of each other for a piecing tip and suggestion today. So yay! Look what we did. I'm so proud of you guys, and I hope that you have fun piecing and getting that seam on top of seam and have great success. And we'll see you next time for ironing and pressing and the difference and some more suggestions. See you soon.